Taking another trip back into the earlier days of DSLRs, we're going to look at the Konica Minolta 7D. Had a few requests to look at this camera. It's a bit of a classic in terms of the design. This is the first dedicated A-mount DSLR from Konica Minolta. Also the first DSLR to have built-in stabilization. A lot of similarities with this and the Film 7 camera. We've got the classic 2 dials on top. Left hand side is for exposure compensation. You can adjust in half and third stops. And they've very cleverly integrated the flash exposure compensation underneath that. This is using the inverted Minolta style hot shoe, but you can get adapters to convert that. The locking mode dial has just the main for exposure programs, and the green P is a sort of full auto mode. You have 3 memory settings too with direct access. Underneath that, the drive mode, single continuous bracketing, and also the self timers. Do like the styling on the shutter button with the groove there and the angled front control dial. On the back of the body, this is also crammed full of controls. We can see the main ones on the left hand side with the on and off switch. You've got sensors for the back LCD. Direct access to the metering modes with another switch. The directional pad, which has a lock and different AF modes. The MSET and ISO, they can be customized to a degree, the MSETs for the settings. It did ship with a plastic screen protector. In case you're wondering on the build quality, the front and the base of the camera are magnesium alloy, with the top and back panel being plastic. They are pretty thick plastics at that, so it definitely does feel like a well-made camera. The overall spec of this is pretty much in line with a semi-professional body for an APS-C camera in that time period. There's no integrated AF assist light on this, that's just a self-timer lamp on the left-hand side. You do have direct controls for the autofocus mode, and you also have a depth of field preview button. It's a little bit easier to get to than the A700, but it's not quite as angled as the 5D. We have a pop-up flash which is manually lifted, and that supports wireless and manual output. I do like the flip-up design. Most cameras you sort of have to pull them out. Doesn't open by accident. I've never had a problem with that. And just a single compact flash card. Note the label facing away from you. Many cameras are the opposite of that. These are running the MP400 batteries, and it's pretty likely that the original cells are not going to be very good, so you're going to be looking around for some third-party ones. You can still pick these up online. Some of the Pentax models also use the same battery. This does support a vertical grip, VC7D. Unfortunately, it's not as nice as the Film 7 grip because you have that L shape. Build on this is mostly plastic with a metal plate on the top. I'm not a big grip user myself, but some people do like the fact that you can have this. It does make it a bit easier if you are shooting in the vertical position. You have the option of using AA batteries or the NP400, 2 of those. I don't have the tray for the AA cells. I suspect most people will be using the lithium batteries, but it is nice that you have an option to use multiple power sources. Do sometimes use AAs for some of the other camera grips that I have. With this camera, we're harking back to an era which is really with a ton of controls on the camera, and you don't see this kind of design these days. Just give you a quick listen on the sound now so you can hear the shutter. Quite similar to the 5D, in other words it's got quite a notable clack, but it does have a larger buffer. We'll do a quick image quality test now. This 6 megapixel CCD is known to be quite decent in terms of the high ISO performance. And really you're not going to notice any major issues until you go past say 1600 up to the maximum setting of 3200. Even the top setting I don't find to be that bad, particularly with modern software. You can get pretty good results, but the JPEGs aren't too bad either. There's a bit of colour noise in the JPEGs, but overall they're pretty good in terms of detail retention. I've just shown you the user guide on the 5D, which shows the zone matching, which is a bit more useful than the manual that comes in the 7D. The zone matching is similar to the 5D, slight difference in terms of the ISO settings. Low mode gives you a boost in the shadows, it skews things to that direction, and the high helps to protect the highlights. Does have a noticeable difference in terms of the raw output, so it's quite a useful mode to have both of these. I usually use the high mode for the highlight protection. These 5D and 7D are quite different in terms of the honeycomb metering. The 7D was quite well known for underexposing. Doesn't happen all the time, but it does tend to go under a bit too much, sometimes 2/3 or a stop. Here's another example outside. You can see it's underexposed a bit with the face. And then I moved over to the spot metering, which gives a great exposure on the face, but we have clipped the highlights. You do have to be quite careful with this camera and that sensor in terms of highlight clipping. Similar to the 5D, we have the option to have a larger display. Display does change orientation as well when you rotate it. Something which I think got overlooked by many makers. It's quite handy to have. I'm just going through the menus on this camera quickly. There is a problem with the screen on this camera. You may notice that the contrast is quite low. A good copy of this camera would have a much clearer LCD display. This one isn't very good. These cameras are over 20 years old, so it's not surprising there's a couple of problems to look out for. But just bear that in mind. I mean, as far as the overall menus go, it's very similar to the 5D and A100 that I looked at. You have a few more options in this model. For example, they did include an interval timer, which is useful, and that wasn't something which we saw on many cameras in this particular time. There is some adjustment in terms of the picture controls, but it is fairly limited. It's something I'll talk about a bit later on. Here's a quick look at the viewfinder. We're using a decent sized one. It's a Penta Prism, so it's larger and brighter than the 5D and A100 cameras. We have the same autofocus system though, the 9-point with the center point being the cross type. In low light situation, the outer points aren't particularly good, so I definitely recommend using the center point. It's not the fastest focus system, but I didn't find it too bad myself. You get used to it. Anti-shake scale is on the right hand side, which is different from the other A-mount cameras that I've looked at. It's a really nice camera to use. It is old, it is quite clunky in terms of comparing it to modern cameras. DSLRs in this time period were getting better, and even in a space of a couple of years you'd notice you get better screens, faster frames per second. Most of the cameras around at this time were either 6 or 8 megapixels. There's not a massive difference between the two of them. But you do have to be a bit more careful, particularly in terms of your dynamic range. Can get decent images off of a 6 megapixel camera, there's no issue there. But if you start cropping in dramatically, then obviously that's going to drop down quite a bit. Comparing the size of the camera, the 7D is a pretty big camera really for an APS-C model. And it's not that far off of a D800, which isn't a particularly small camera by any means. I like both of these cameras, and the reason is because there's a lot of controls on the body, and many of them are quite similar. You have the drive dial selection, and the metering mode, you have a dedicated switch for that. Always interested me how camera designs vary between brands and makers, and they sort of borrow ideas from each other at times. 5D is a much simpler camera in terms of the layout and controls. A few areas that are annoying with the 7D.
You'll not put your foot on me again.
You can't zoom into raw images. You'll have to use RAW and JPEG if you want to do that. Colour modes, we only have 3, which is quite bizarre really. There's no black and white with this camera. You can't pick that. There's no portrait modes. We still have the first black frame issue, which has been a problem on both models. Tokina were doing repairs for quite a few years on these products, but that's ended now. So really you're going to be looking at independent workshops if they are repairable and there's spare parts around. Probably easier to try and get a replacement. There's a lot less 7Ds around nowadays. One thing I will say about the Konica Minolta cameras, even though there were only 2 DSLRs from the company, they do have a very good look in terms of the overall skin tones and colour rendition. If you need more megapixels and an updated feature set, including faster frame rate, the A700 is a pretty good bet. done a detailed review on that particular camera, and it shares a lot of functionality with the 7D. Sony for some reason decided to drop the dual dials on the top plate, which I think was a mistake. The output's also quite different between these two cameras, so I'll leave that down to your own personal taste. We only had 2 DSLRs from the company. It would have been interesting to see where they went with the body designs and ergonomics, but you just don't see this kind of attention to detail nowadays in terms of the user experience. Many cameras these days can be quite boring and generic. They seem to just rehash the same camera over and over again. If you can get a chance to use one of these, I do recommend it. It is a fun and engaging experience. If you've got any suggestions for cameras that you're interested in, I'll be doing some more reviews later on in the year, so let me know down in the comments section. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. I'll put some links down below so that you can support the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos.